Hello, and welcome back to another podcast episode. For those of you who are listening for the first time, my name is Jackie, and this podcast is especially designed for intermediate and advanced English learners. If you'd like to listen and read along, you can access the full annotated transcript of this episode on my website, JackieTeachesEnglish.com. So, without further ado, let's dive in. Today is International Women's Day, and to mark the occasion, I want to talk to you about the late, great Audrey Hepburn, whose name I'm sure you recognize as one of the most loved film icons of the 20th century. But there's more to Audrey than meets the eye, and it is her fascinating life and career that I'd like to share with you today. Let's begin with Audrey's early life and childhood. She was born near Brussels in Belgium in 1929. Her father was a British-Austrian businessman, and her mother was a Dutch baroness. As a result, Audrey traveled frequently between the two countries and became bilingual. In fact, she would go on to speak 5 languages, which is hugely inspirational for us language learners. Her parents were both self-proclaimed fascists and collected donations for the British Union of Fascists in the mid-1930s. This is something that Audrey later said she never forgave her mother for. Her parents divorced when she was 6 years old, and her father's departure and subsequent absence from her life had a profound effect on her. After a short spell of living in England with her mother, they moved to the Netherlands after the outbreak of World War II. This was largely due to the fact that the Netherlands was a neutral country, and her mother hoped that it wouldn't be invaded. But sadly, her mother was very wrong. The Netherlands was invaded in 1940, and young Audrey would have to endure the hardships of Nazi occupation for 5 years. In 1942, Audrey's uncle was executed in retaliation for an act of sabotage by the resistance movement. Although he hadn't played any part in it, he had been a prominent and openly anti-Nazi figure. This terrible event in the family was a turning point in Audrey's mother's attitude, as she had previously flirted with Nazism and, of course, fascism, as earlier stated. Here, to flirt with something means to entertain the idea of something, to show interest in something, but not very seriously. It was at this point, too, that Audrey started to volunteer as an assistant to a local doctor, Hendrik Wissert-Hooft, who was a member of the Dutch resistance. Although a young teenager at the time, Audrey supported the resistance through her dancing. She performed at illegal, underground shows that were named Zwarte Avonden, and I apologize for my Dutch pronunciation, by the way, in case there's any Dutch listeners out there, or in English, Black Evenings, so called as the windows were blacked out so that German officers couldn't see what was happening inside. These shows helped to raise vital funds for those in the community sheltering Jewish people. In an interview, Audrey later said, "I did indeed give various underground concerts to raise money for the Dutch resistance movement. I danced at recitals, designing the dances myself. I had a friend who played the piano, and my mother made the costumes. They were very amateurish attempts, but nevertheless at the time, when there was very little entertainment, it amused people and gave them an opportunity to get together and spend a pleasant afternoon listening to music and seeing my humble attempts." In this quote, Audrey uses a word I'd like to point out to you, the word amateurish. In the phrase amateurish attempts, amateur means unprofessional, and by adding the ish, she is modifying it to mean somewhat or to a certain extent. A fun word, and one to practice saying out loud if you can. Audrey's efforts in the resistance weren't limited to performing. The local resistance helped many American and British parachuters and pilots evade capture during the Allied bombing campaign. They helped keep the airmen hidden and would spirit them south through the Pyrenees Mountains and into Spain. To spirit someone means to remove someone from a place quickly and secretly, to whisk someone away without notice. And Audrey assisted this brave endeavor by delivering food to the pilots. As she spoke English fluently, she was a great asset. There is one story that Audrey told herself later on in life. One day, Audrey, who was at that time 15 years old, went out looking for a fighter pilot who had been shot down and was hiding in the woods outside the village. After delivering a message to him, she saw Nazi police approaching. Audrey kept her wits about her and began picking wildflowers. When the officers approached, she presented the flowers sweetly to them, pretending to be an innocent child, presented her papers, and was allowed to go on her way. It seems like her acting career had already started. By 1945, the situation had become dire. 500 Dutch people were starving to death every week. In retaliation for the Dutch railway strikes that were held to try to disrupt the Nazi occupation, the Germans blocked and limited the food and fuel supplies available to civilians, which started the 1944 to 1945 Dutch famine. The people found themselves desperate, making flour out of tulip bulbs in order to survive. Although Audrey's family had been privileged and wealthy before the war, they went hungry along with everyone else and suffered the same consequences of the occupation as everyone else. Her half-brother Ian was deported to Berlin to work in a labor camp, and her other half-brother went into hiding to avoid the same fate. Audrey herself became extremely ill, diagnosed with anemia, jaundice, and edema, and she would have surely died had her mother not managed to obtain penicillin by calling in a favor from a former lover and British Army officer. The severe malnutrition she suffered during this time stunted her growth and would give her a small frame for the rest of her life. In 1945, the family moved to Amsterdam, and Audrey started ballet training. Her mother, Ella, supported the family by working as a cook and a housekeeper to a wealthy family. Later that year, they moved to London, as Audrey had received a ballet scholarship to train with Ballet Rambert. Sadly, the impact of her malnutrition and illness during the occupation got in the way of her aspirations. She was told that her height and weak constitution made her dreams of becoming a ballerina simply unfeasible, so she decided to turn her sight to acting instead. If you turn your sight to something, it means that you direct your attention or focus to it. And Audrey's acting career began as a chorus girl in the West End. At the same time, she began modeling and taking acting classes, which helped land her parts in British films. One of these films would change the course of her career entirely. In 1951, she took a small role in a bilingual film entitled Monte Carlo Baby. As the title suggests, the filming took place in Monte Carlo. As luck would have it, the renowned French novelist Colette happened to be staying at the very same hotel where the movie was being filmed. She was so impressed with Audrey's performance during the shoot that she gave her the lead role in the upcoming Broadway play Gigi, based on her novel by the same name. Audrey was lauded, a fancy word for praised, for her performance with the New York Times, stating, "Her quality is so winning and so right that she is the success of the evening." Hepburn's Hollywood film career started with her starring in the film Roman Holiday in 1953 alongside Gregory Peck. And here's an interesting fact, and one that certainly raises Gregory Peck in my estimation. Originally, the film was only going to have Gregory Peck's name above the title, with "Introducing Audrey Hepburn" in a smaller font underneath. Peck suggested that Hepburn's name be at the same level as his own, saying, "You've got to change that because she'll be a big star and I'll look like a big jerk." Gregory Peck certainly had a good eye for talent and the gift of foresight, as Audrey won Best Actress at the Oscars for her performance and would have a meteoric rise to stardom. The following year, Audrey returned to the Broadway stage and starred in Ondine alongside the actor Mel Ferrer. Not only did she win a Tony Award for her performance, but she also found love offstage, marrying her co-star Ferrer in 1954 in Switzerland. Hepburn's catalog of work is extensive, and sadly, one podcast episode isn't going to suffice in order to cover everything. However, it would be remiss of me to not mention one of her most iconic roles, Holly Golightly in Breakfast at Tiffany's in 1961. In this film, Hepburn set new fashion standards and the little black dress she wears in the opening credits is still famous to this day. Largely considered Hepburn's defining role, Audrey herself said, "I'm an introvert. Playing the extroverted girl was the hardest thing I ever did." And of course, one cannot think of Audrey Hepburn without envisaging the 1964 film My Fair Lady. She was adored as the Cockney flower girl Eliza Doolittle, although Hepburn herself was much aggrieved when her vocals were dubbed by the singer Marni Nixon after Audrey had undergone lengthy vocal preparation for the role. Apparently, she walked off the set when she found out. Despite her voice not making it into the film, Hepburn was labeled Eliza for the ages, and her performance was the best of her career, according to Time magazine. Audrey's personal life wasn't without its ups and downs. In 1968, Audrey divorced her husband, Mel Ferrer, after a 14-year marriage. The couple had a son, Sean, who had been born in 1960. She would marry her second husband, an Italian psychiatrist, Andrea Dotti, a year later, and the couple had a son, Luca, in 1970. The marriage would last 12 years. From 1980 until her death, Audrey was in a relationship with Dutch actor Robert Wolders. She said that the years she spent with him were the happiest in her life, and that she considered them married, just not officially. In Audrey's later years, acting took a backseat to her humanitarian work on behalf of children. The idiom to take a back seat means to have lesser importance or a smaller role in favor of something else. Hepburn was quite revolutionary in this regard, as she was the first major Hollywood star to do charity work on this kind of scale. She wanted to raise awareness about children in need, as she knew all too well what it was like to go hungry from her experience during the German occupation. In the 1980s, she became a goodwill ambassador for UNICEF. Her first field mission was to Ethiopia, and from there she went on to Turkey, South America, Central America, Sudan, Bangladesh, Vietnam, and Somalia. A UN photographer, John Isaac, said that often the children would have flies all over them, but she would just go and hug them. Other people had a certain amount of hesitation, but she would just grab them. She was awarded a Special Academy Award for her humanitarian work in 1993, but didn't live long enough to accept it herself. Sadly, upon returning from Somalia in 1992, Audrey developed abdominal pain and was diagnosed with cancer. After surgery and chemotherapy, Hepburn died in her sleep at her home in Switzerland on January 20th, 1993, at the age of 63. As you can imagine, so many people mourned her death, including her co-star Gregory Peck, who recorded a tearful recital of the poem Unending Love as a tribute to her. Now that we've discovered Audrey Hepburn's incredible life, career, and humanitarian contributions, I want to spend a little time focusing on her overall legacy and try to uncover who Audrey really was as a person. Of course, there's her humanitarian work that continues on in her name. Her sons, Sean and Luca, established the Audrey Hepburn Memorial Fund at UNICEF, which carries on the work she started. From a career perspective, Audrey Hepburn's name has secured its place among the best-loved and most iconic stars. The American Film Institute named her third among the greatest female stars of American cinema, after Katharine Hepburn and Bette Davis. She is also one of only 14 entertainers to have won Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, and Tony Awards. She truly did it all. Despite her success, I'm under the impression that Audrey Hepburn was incredibly humble. Her son Sean later said, "My mother would be the first to say that she wasn't the best actress in the world, but she was a movie star." And in her private life, she apparently wore very comfortable and casual clothes, compared to the glitzy haute couture she wore on screen and at public events. In fact, despite being renowned as one of the greatest beauties of all time, she apparently, and I think sadly, never considered herself attractive. In a 1959 interview, she said, I hated myself at certain periods. I was too fat, or maybe too tall, or maybe just plain too ugly. You can say my definiteness stems from underlying feelings of insecurity and inferiority. And in 1989, she said, "My look is attainable. Women can look like Audrey Hepburn by flipping out their hair, buying the large glasses and the little sleeveless dresses." Here is my takeaway from this. Audrey Hepburn didn't have to say any of these things. She must have known how revered her look was by women all around the world. But I read her comments and ownership of her insecurity as an act of solidarity to all women. A reminder that even those whose beauty is so praised and coveted can still feel insecure, and we should try to be kind to ourselves. And it's clear to me that Audrey's true beauty runs so much deeper than her glamour and fame. From her brave efforts during the resistance in World War II, her resilience in the face of adversity and suffering during the occupation, her determination and dedication to her craft, to the incredible work she did for children around the world, I think Audrey Hepburn is a role model, and I'm delighted to have been able to research her life and share parts of it with you for International Women's Day 2026. To end this episode, I leave you with a quote from Audrey herself. She said, "For beautiful eyes, look for the good in others. For beautiful lips, speak only words of kindness. And for poise, walk with the knowledge that you are never alone." And on that note, we're going to wrap it up here. Thank you for listening to this episode of Jackie Teaches English, and I hope that you found Audrey Hepburn as inspiring a woman as I did, and that you also walk away with some interesting expressions and vocabulary. I really encourage you to download the free annotated transcript from my website, where I point out even more advanced words and phrases. And if you are looking to improve your spoken English by discussing cultural topics and more, you can find information about my individual and small group lessons. I'd love to help you take your English to the next level. For now, I wish you a very happy International Women's Day wherever you are in the world, and I will see you next time. Bye!